Hello everyone, friends! The tension between Trump and Europe eased as of yesterday. It was announced that Trump withdrew his tariff threats and reached an agreement regarding Greenland. With these statements, the markets breathed a sigh of relief. With this sudden turnaround, there was a slight change in investors' risk perception. Some of the investors who had fled from risk started to move back towards risk. The stock market and the cryptocurrency market breathed a sigh of relief. Right at that moment, products like gold and silver experienced panic selling. But as of last night, they returned to upward trends again. So why is that? If we ask that question, the answer is actually very simple. Because there is demand. Look, central banks continue to strengthen their reserves with gold due to geopolitical risks and the weakening credibility of the dollar. Some countries, for example Serbia, are continuing to strengthen their reserves by rapidly purchasing gold. And according to the latest data from the end of 2025, countries like Poland, Brazil, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, China, and India are net buyers. Look, these are very fresh news, my friends. In other words, central banks are continuing to accumulate gold, just like you do. Of course, I had told you about all this even before this trend had started. Let me give you one of the freshest and most striking examples. Goldman Sachs made a statement. They say, we are observing and seeing the strong demand created by central banks and private investors. That's why we've revised our year-end forecast for gold prices upward, and we are projecting a 25% increase in gold per ounce this year, they say. They announced that they expect the price of gold per ounce to rise to the $5,400 level. In the meantime, if you ask for my opinion, I think this rise could happen within a few months, and it could even go beyond that. We might see the price of gold reach $5,500 and above within a few months. So in my view, gold will rise much more. And if you like, let's take a look at this on the charts. Let's talk about both Goldman's analysis and what we see in our technical data. Before we start discussing these, as I've often asked in recent videos, I'd like to ask for your support with likes and comments. Your support really matters against YouTube's algorithms and bots. Thank you to everyone, whether you support or not. Now let's start analyzing the charts. Now that we've started with gold, let's continue with gold. We can clearly see that the upward trend in ounce gold is continuing as we approach the weekly close. This is what we see technically. But why do companies like Goldman point to higher target areas? If you ask whether it's just fundamental news flow or if there's a technical reality to this, in my view, the technical reality is this. It could show a move up to the 5,544 level with a similar bull flag pattern. If you ask what I mean by similar, I've explained this to you before. I had said that I expected a move like this with a breakout of the trend here. Now, it could bring about the same move here in a similar way. I think that from here, gold could be carried to the $5,544 level within a cycle of a few months. While this is the detail I can simply show on the technical side, there are many news items on the fundamental side. In my opinion, the most important of these news items is that in 2026, wars will not decrease, but rather increase. Anti-American sentiment will rise even more, and the US dollar will continue to weaken. That's why I expect central banks to further reduce their dollar reserves and continue buying more gold. So just like in 2025, gold will continue to be an important investment vehicle in 2026 as well. In other words, I don't think the Fed will be very persistent about rate cuts in the next few months. The incoming data also points in this direction. Rapid rate cuts will not continue. But despite this, there is a serious loss of confidence in the dollar. The anti-American sentiment has also become a separate issue after Trump. That's why gold continues to stand before us as the most important safe haven. At least as long as there is no change in the trends within the next few months' cycle, we will continue to argue for the continuation of these increases. In short-term pullbacks will only be an additional buying opportunity for new investors. If we look at silver and ask whether there is a similar flag pattern in silver, the answer is no. Silver hasn't formed such a healthy structure because it moved in a very rapid trend. That's why in the recent period, I've talked about ideas like taking profits from silver holdings and converting them into gold assets, and mainly staying in gold. So within this trend, I am still holding on to silver. But by converting my profits from silver into gold, I've reduced my risk perception here. Because in my opinion, the technical story is stronger on the gold side. I'm waiting for the trend to become inconsistent before selling off the remaining silver I have. As long as it doesn't become inconsistent, I'll keep updating the support levels upward, and will continue to hold as long as these levels are maintained. Those are the kinds of comments I'll be making. We last did this at $83. Then we discussed it at the $87 level. In the near term, after the weekly closings come in as of tomorrow, we'll probably have revised the support zone up to the $90 levels. Of course, investors care more about the gram side. For example, when you ask what kind of movement awaits us in gram gold, here's what I think. For those who said, I didn't buy at the 6,350 to 6,400 Turkish lira range, I'm still not buying gold, well, too bad. I've said a new trend will start, and very soon at that. In other words, I pointed to this week. This week, gold has started this trend. Now, gold has climbed to the 6,700 to 6,800 Turkish lira levels, and I don't think there are any resistance zones ahead for gold. In my opinion, it's clearly open all the way up to 7,760 Turkish lira levels. I also don't expect gold to drop much, meaning I don't foresee it falling below the 6,300 to 6,400 Turkish lira levels. When you ask how high the price could go at the next resistance level, based on Goldman's forecast and the flag-like movements I just described, I think gold in grams could reach 9,000 Turkish lira. I believe this move will happen within a few months. Of course, it's entirely up to you to consider these ideas, filter them through your own perspective, and design your own purchases and portfolios accordingly. But my clear opinion here is this. Within a few months, the regions that gold will target, in order, will be 7,760 Turkish lira, followed by the 9,000 Turkish lira level. When we look at the American stock market, the NASDAQ 100 is up today. After the news from Trump last night, we can say that the American stock market is a bit more bullish. Technically, the move towards the negative hasn't really shown itself yet anyway. But during the November, December, and January period, the American stock market has been in a range where it couldn't move much higher, and I don't think there's a story right now that would feed American stocks more or push them up faster. That's why I'm approaching this a bit cautiously. When it comes to new purchases, I think it's more reasonable to take positions in Borsa Istanbul rather than in the American stock market today. For the past month and a half, I've already been making more comparisons between these two. I've shared my expectation for a rise in Borsa Istanbul during the December-January period. We're wrapping up the month of January. If you ask what's going to happen in the coming period, I think the upward trend will continue for a while longer, at least unless we see any contrary data. And I believe the next major resistance level for Borsa Istanbul is at 14,000. The trend in Borsa Istanbul is also clearly continuing upward. Based on the questions from investors in the YouTube membership chat, there are many stocks I follow and talk about here, according to people's questions. These stocks are not only on the Borsa Istanbul side, but also in the American stock market. Those who want more information and more details on these topics can join our conversations in the YouTube membership chat. To sum up, in my opinion, as the target areas for gold expand on a technical scale and its story grows, it seems that gold will continue to be the #1 choice for both companies and countries when it comes to investing. When I look at the technical chart for silver in terms of upward revision of targets, I don't currently see any price movement that I can really make sense of. That's why I haven't raised the upper bar for silver. I also don't want to throw out a random number, but on the gram gold side, I think with a new trend just starting, gram gold could go up to 9,000 TL. If we turn to the cryptocurrency side, with its recent moves, Bitcoin has actually started to shift toward negative territory rather than increasing its positivity. This will become more apparent in the next few days. So what do I mean by that? If after the weekly close of the traditional markets tomorrow, Bitcoin is still lacking volume and remains below the $90,500 level over the weekend, it could make a move similar to the wick it threw here, possibly throwing a similar wick in this area as well. The $79,000 level will become a clear support zone. If, within a 2-day time frame, it doesn't hold above the $90,500 level, which, by the way, Bitcoin is currently very close to, sitting at $90,100. And what we want is very simple. Tomorrow and over the weekend, Bitcoin needs to be held above this level so that it can show upward momentum. Because the next stage for Bitcoin would be $101,000. Of course, we can't really say that global investors are looking at the crypto market very positively during this period. But what I can say clearly is that I think these assets are still in a cheap position here. So overall, there isn't much variability in the situation with altcoins. We're seeing similar movements in Ethereum, XRP, and Solana as well. What catches my attention here is the weakness in the total 3 chart. The fact that it's staying below this cloud region is currently frustrating. In other words, within the next 2 or 3 days before the weekend, we need to see a new move above this green cloud region. If this move doesn't happen, what does it mean? It means that while coins like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP continue to stay strong in the crypto market, smaller altcoins will be left to face even more pressure and steeper declines. Because we see the same weakness when we look at the dominance of the crypto market outside the top 10 coins. It's showing weakness below the cloud region. This dominance needs to climb back up to around 7% so that smaller altcoins can breathe a little easier in the coming period. Of course, during this period, these were the things I talked about specifically regarding the crypto market. Focusing on the blue chip altcoins is the most logical option. In fact, you should reduce your holdings in small altcoins and shift toward the high market cap coins I've mentioned. Of course, I explain these by ranking them, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, and Solana. Even these, under the current market conditions, have dropped somewhat and frustrated investors. But the drops in small altcoins have been extremely deep and extremely severe. The biggest losses for investors have also come from these small altcoins. And also, those who constantly pushed for leverage trades in the futures market, those who traded with high leverage, ended up losing the most money. On the other hand, those who stayed put, who steadily held on to major coins like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP, and those who made gradual purchases, we can say they are in a somewhat more comfortable position. You know, I always have a saying, we should be among the minority who lose the least. Since this has always been my philosophy, my way of thinking, that's why I talk about these products as a portfolio. And when I say portfolio, I don't mean an altcoin portfolio. This portfolio is based on a mindset that includes other markets as well. I'm talking about investing simultaneously in gold, silver, the American stock market, Borsa Istanbul, and the cryptocurrency market. People who follow closely, listen, and aren't too greedy eventually find opportunities to increase their earnings. And I believe they will continue to find such opportunities in the period ahead as well. Without dragging it out, I'd like to wrap things up by saying that this is how things look at the weekly close. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope it's a good weekend for the markets, especially for the cryptocurrency market as well. Investors also need to see more upward movement. No matter what the prices are, I hope you all stay in good spirits, my friends. See you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Subscribing to my channel and turning on notifications is an investment advice for yourself, with the intention of informing you about developments before they even happen. See you again.